Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. We have a very special guest here with us today, and we are going to get to her. But before I give it away, I have to say hello to my partner, Jamie. How's it going?
Hi, good to be here. Good to see you as always. Happy to be on Real Food Recovery today. Today, we do have a very, very cool episode and an awesome guest. Our guest today is Dr. Laurie Marbas. And I'll read Dr. Marbas's bio in a moment, but Dr. Marbas has just a wonderful, wonderful way about her that she brings her knowledge, brings her wisdom in to the people that she works with, the people that she lectures to, speaks to, interviews with, and she makes, I would say, not only medicine, but the whole food plant-based approach to medicine, very relatable. So Dr. Marbas is a double board certified family medicine and lifestyle medicine physician. She's been utilizing food as medicine since 2012. And not only does she utilize food as medicine for treatment, she walks the talk herself. She currently holds 50 state medical licenses, including DC, across the US. She's got a small concierge practice at drmarbas.com. She is co-founder of The Healing Kitchen with Brittany Giroudi, who I'm so excited. I can't wait to talk to you more about this venture. And their goal with Dr. Marbas and Brittany is really giving a platform where a chef and a doctor can come together in a kitchen to provide a recipe of health. I really believe, and Paige, I know you feel strongly that these two things go hand in hand in food addiction recovery. She was a former co-founder of Mora Medical and plant-based telehealth. She was instrumental in creating and was the first managing partner for the Plantrition Project's International Journal of Disease Reversal and Prevention. She's also the host of the Dr. Laurie Marbas podcast, whose mission is to provide resources that will empower individuals with the knowledge, mindset, and inspiration to successfully adopt lifestyle interventions and achieve health and well-being. During her time in Colorado, Dr. Marbas persuaded a large hospital to create a lifestyle medicine program centered around a whole food plant-based diet. The program showed resounding success. At another hospital, she conducted a 1-month study of 26 employees on a whole food plant-based diet. All employees were fed from the hospital's kitchen, which is, as we all know, not what people think of when they think of hospital food. And each individual experienced improved health. She has spoken at the Golden Veg Fest in Colorado, the International Plant-Based Nutrition Healthcare Conference, and other venues teaching about the value of a whole food plant-based diet. Laurie received her dual degrees, MD and MBA, from Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center School of Medicine and the Texas Tech University School of Business. She was awarded the university's School of Medicine Gold-Headed Cane Award, a symbol for excellence in the art of medicine and the care of patients. She wrote 7 books while in medical school, 6 of which were in a series called Visual Mnemonics. These books used cartoons to help people memorize vast amounts of information, a system that helped her personally when she was a mom attending medical school. As a U.S. Air Force veteran, she served in the Middle East and South America. She's also a wife, mom of 3 grown children now, author, speaker, and avid runner. She is an inspiration in so many ways. I don't know anybody who was able to go to med school, raise children, and write 6 books. That is impressive, to say the least. And here's my personal story of Dr. Marbas. I got to work with her as a patient a few years ago, and it really changed my life. I came to work with Dr. Marbas. It was at a place in my health journey where I felt like I was in a good spot, from a weight perspective and a health perspective, but I knew I wanted to refine a few things. So I worked with her directly to sit down and look at the things that we could refine from my diet and my lifestyle. And she had me, for 90 days, do a very targeted, specific approach to data collection. Not only the food I was eating, but the lifestyle I was living, and even had me wear a continuous glucose monitor for just 1 month, just to get some data and see what the food was doing inside my body. And we learned so much. And at the end of the sort of 90 days, we came back together, and she said, "You're going to live forever." And I just thought, as a woman who at 33 years old thought I'm not going to make it to 40, to have Dr. Marbas give me that kind of feedback, it was just life changing. It really was. I felt like I had finally come out from under this rock of addiction that I'd been carrying for so long, and obesity that I'd been carrying for so long. She gave me a new lease in so many ways. So I have deep gratitude for you, Dr. Marbas. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh,
I am
thank you.
too. And when she's reading all this, the first thing I want to say, is that all she's done? Is that it? Is there more? But, Dr. Marbus and I were talking a little bit before we started recording about how some people are just they come here genetically pre-wired and are destined for greatness. Obviously, you have accomplished a, a huge amount in your, I'm going to say, short lifetime for what all you've done. Do you feel like you came to this earth pre-wired for this greatness, or did you have this defining moment of, I'm going to be a type AAA and I'm going to start doing this, and this? Or like I said, was it just natural to you?
Well, first of all, I have such deep gratitude for that warm and lovely introduction. I thank you. I'm humbled and um have the utmost respect for you, Jamie, too. And I'm sure you too, Paige. I as I get to know you. First call me Laurie, please. That's a really fantastic question. And I think my answer would have been different 1 year, 2, 3 years ago. I would
Mm.
say, um, for me, I think we're all destined for greatness, and life circumstances will set us up for different, so to speak, journeys. And it's really up to us. I think this is where the point of um, acceptance and reflection and understanding that the circumstances that you're born in does not dictate your future. And that was a case for me. I came from a very uh, oh, uh, dysfunctional and a place of scarcity and struggle with my family unit. Not that I disregard, I appreciate they've done the best they could. But what I am so thankful about those circumstances, it was painful in the beginning. And as I, grew up and dealt with things, um, I see now where I had to be presented those opportunities to have time for growth and reflection and become a better human being, but not just the human, but the being part is really important to me these days. And so I think it just is a matter of, yes, you can be given a set of circumstances. You can choose to see them as limited or unlimited. And I
Okay.
think the coolest thing is when you come from quote unquote what we would in this world judge as limited, we can really find opportunity that is much greater than those who maybe come with more choices in the form of, things and opportunities in the sense of somebody handing you stuff. Because when you have to look deep within yourself and understand that this acceptance of this moment and that life is going to be continuously changing, right? Because you choose not to accept these limited circumstances, that allowed you to be open to such a greater amount of
Mhm.
unlimitless everything. And if someone could just start life with that attitude, whether you come from a wonderful family unit or not, there's going to be so many wonderful things happen in this earth. And that really is where I think that for me, destiny is, in the sense of we all have it within us, that being, and every single one of us has greatness because we're all part of the life force that makes this place the way it is. And so
Mhm.
um yeah, that would be, I think, the answer for that for now.
Sounds like you tapped into. You got out of the way, so to speak. You let that your past not
Yeah.
hold you back enough so that you could tap into this life force and
It took
become
some time,
sure.
right?
That's
So
actually what I was going to ask you, is if did you recognize it when you were young, or did it take, you know,
um I think what I saw in the beginning, I was very blessed with two very dear friends that had families that modeled what could be in a healthy relationship. And I would still even say that's superficial on the surface of really understanding your life essence and who we are. And but as I grew, I think there was a period of my life I had a very much a victim mentality of, I would look at others and go, man, I wish I could have had whatever, whatever. Oh, I wish I could have had whatever, whatever. And what was interesting, the attitude brought me even more suffering, right? It brought me
Totally.
to a
Totally.
place that I was never going to crawl out of the hole that I put myself in because I kept removing the ladder. Someone could
Right.
throw me 1,000 lifelines, and if I choose not to see them, I'm not going to climb out of the hole. Um, and so I think that goes with anything. But it took, there was an opportunity that was presented to me, a very painful opportunity. I'd say about 14 years ago or so, that really shook me to my core and allowed me to see um, that this was not okay. And I've only been a better person for it. I had to, apparently I'm quite stubborn. And so I have to be thrown some serious life lessons to get my attention. And so I think type A personalities, those who are successful, sometimes have to go through the greatest suffering in order to just return and go, the past, the future mean nothing. It's this moment that really counts. So
Mhm.
right now, this time with you is sacred to me, right? Because I see this moment is ever evolving. I don't live moment to moment. I live one moment. I was birds. There was a life before. I consider obviously a spirit or soul. You were birds, you live, there's death, but there's going to be more than that. But this time it's just one moment that's just ever changing. And by living in that root, being rooted in that, helps me not worry about future life circumstances or be defined by my past story. And so um that's trying the work and the message I try to bring to my patients and people I interact with and share now, because it's
Yeah.
such a powerful way to live, but so joyous and free at the same time.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's the whole lifestyle, not just what people think of when they hear the term lifestyle medicine,
Yeah.
but it really is walking that talk. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So I've known you and worked with you for about, oh gosh, over about 4 years now, and
Mhm.
you've given me y- and the patients you work with across the board so much, not only of yourself and of your vulnerability and authenticity, but really to the community. So you've gone from building this multi-physician practice and all, a couple of startups along the way to podcast hosts. Now you've even taken that journey now into this healing kitchen
Mhm.
um, startup and movement, really.
Mm.
What's that journey been like for you?
Yeah, so I think a big part of that journey is understanding you just have to say yes.
Okay.
And know that when there's a problem, there's a solution. Sometimes it's through the problem that you can see the solution. There's a veil that needs to be removed by going through the problem. Go through the obstacle. Therein lies the solution and the opportunity.
Mhm.
And so I would say, when you seek life's adventures in that attitude, it comes really fun. And then you can reflect back and go, wow, all these serendipitous moments, coincidences there weren't coincidences. These are the way it's supposed to be. And so the cool thing was that, even going back to medical school with the books, right? I drew cartoons because I had to survive medical school with 3 little kids. A husband was active duty. So that's how
Mhm.
I remember vast amounts of information with limited time circumstance. And then it turned into opportunities to publish and share that with others. And I always tease people, as like, I don't know if you want me as your doctor. I literally made it to medical school on cartoons. And so that's just the way, that's how it works. And so it's just like with plant-based telehealth, right? There was an opportunity, there was a solution to a problem. People, you'd go and speak, why can't I find a plant-based doctor? And so we set upon ourselves to find a solution and we implemented it. It was a lot of work. I learned some amazing lessons.
Mm.
Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. And You have to have a different
We're
mindset.
learning that.
Yeah, it's not one that you take lightly, but it's also such a joy to have that freedom. But with freedom comes struggle and responsibilities and harsher lessons. But again, it's all good. Um, so I'd say it's been fun, and then the joy of the Healing Kitchen is really working with Brittany, who herself, right? So she lost 70 pounds. She's only 4'11",
Yeah,
right? So
tiny.
tiny.
Oh,
She's pregnant with her first baby as well, which is so fun. And, seeing someone so young embrace this lifestyle and this way of thinking and understanding that her journey could offer opportunities to help others along the journey, right? With the food. And it's such a way she presents it, and it's with such love and caring. And so people just are just drawn to her, just warm disposition. And so it's just fabulous. I'm excited to work with her it's just fun. And
Yeah.
so and then she had reached out to me last year, and I was like, hey, I have this idea. And it kind of came from, because you did a video for more, it came out of
Mhm.
that idea of this healing kitchen. And I tried to work with a previous chef friend of mine, Martin Oswald, and we had done like the doc and stuff, but it wasn't the right time. It didn't take
Yeah.
off. We just didn't have the time. But so that was, playing around in my head. You set it on this shelf and it will come out when it's ready. And so she's like, yeah, let's do it. And so we meet Wednesdays live every Wednesday. She gets 2 recipes, and then I answer medical questions, and then we run 2 expert workshops, which we should have you guys do one of our workshops. It would be fun.
we can.
Um, yeah, so we present an expert workshop, which for
Mhm.
years, of course, would be the food addiction piece, and then I present a workshop as well and create an ebook, because I love the teaching creating piece.
Yeah.
And so let's say this next week will be all about plant-based 101. It'll be uh everything from getting started, like A to Z. If you've been on it for the beginning, or you're in the middle of it, or you've been on it for decades, everything, social pressures, what to be eating, what labs to be checking, all that. And so um that'll be this workshop. But I've done one on osteoporosis, psychology of weight loss, the insulin
Yes.
resistance, and plant-based labs. um what others? There's so many. But anyway, these come from places, listening to my patients, listening to the audience, and saying this is what we need, and just being open to being the vessel of that transformation, of that information, right? And so, and then creating it in a way that's affordable as much as possible for the general audience. But
Yeah.
yeah, so yep, that's that.
Excellent, excellent. I love the partnership. I think it's so brilliant, the two of you. And you're right, she's super approachable. She's gotten such a following from the recipes that she creates, because she's very real. And even though I don't know Brittany, just sharing in the excitement of her first baby, and she's brought her whole family into the mix.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
over the last
yeah,
few years of their journey together, through from sickness and disease around, using standard American food, now to this life and vibrancy that a lot of them have. The Drury
yeah.
family has really shown what whole food plant-based nutrition can do.
And I think what's really cool is she lost her mom along the way from breast cancer a few years ago, but her baby's due on her mother's birthday.
Oh, I love
Oh, that's
it.
Yeah,
great.
that's
That's so
just
beautiful.
amazing. I hope that baby
Yeah.
arrives on the birthday. I really
Yeah,
do.
I
Right?
know.
And so, but yeah, that is such a fun, um, yeah, she's fantastic, and she's gonna touch so many lives. Yeah.
I love it. I
I
love
mean,
it.
that's kind of where we are too at Real Food Recovery. We work with such a broad spectrum of people. So for us, we don't advocate for a certain eating style because everyone is so different.
Mhm.
We say we're food plan neutral, but processed food free. So
Mhm.
tell us a little bit more about what makes you lean into the whole food plant-based versus working with your patients and just saying, you got to cut out the processed food. Or
Yeah, no,
where do you start on
yeah.
the,
So that's a really fascinating evolution of my own journey as a doctor. So I would say, I've always been healthy, right? And I've always preached and tried to walk a walk of healthy eating, exercise, stress reduction, sleep. But what was interesting, even though you would walk with patients and say, okay, this is what you need to do, the checkoff list approach, um, certainly we can all, I think, regardless of the dietary pattern that you have chosen, removing ultra processed food is absolutely across the board the most healthy thing you can do, right? Where does it get more nuanced for me, focused on whole food plant-based living, is a place with a patient when I lived in Rifle, Colorado 12 years ago, who came to me and she's like, Dr. Marbas, meat and dairy upset my stomach. And I said, well, stop eating meat and dairy, come back in 30 days, intuitively understanding that there were foods she could consume, but it didn't leave me with the notion of, oh, this is a plant-based diet that I'm prescribing. It was just a diet of removing meat and dairy. And she came back in 30 days. I had always make notes, of course, in the chart about, our conversation. So I knew what was to be expected. But what was interesting, she brought her daughter with her, who was 16 at the time, with her to the appointment. And I'm thinking to myself, as a mother and a doctor and someone missing school, to come to her mother's appointment going, what kind of conversation am I going to have? Is it going to be one about sex or drugs, or what am I going to be dealing with? Because I had no clue. I was like, oh, and so I walked in with a little apprehension. But what was interesting, the patient goes to her daughter and says, tell Dr. Marbas what you did. And I'm like, okay, here we go. And she goes, well, my mom was eating this way, so I thought I would support her. And I started cooking with her. And I felt so good. I stopped both my attention deficit disorder medications. I was like,
Oh,
that's
wow.
really fascinating. And I was like, what? And her mom goes, yeah. Why was she able to do that? I said, I don't know, but that's by far the coolest thing I'd ever heard. And it really kind of got my brain going in a way it hadn't been before. Like, I understood we don't need to be eating certain foods, but a plant-based diet really took it to the next level. And so I sat down with them and I just kind of spoke to them about what they were doing. What were they doing? Fruits, veggies, beans, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. Because there in Rifle, Colorado, there was no vegan restaurants. There was no place to buy these type of, or eat out, which again, eating out can also be difficult to find truly healthy food. But what that allowed me to do was the presence of mind to go and Google as soon as the appointment was over, plant-based diet, because I was like, there's plants, and ADD. And what popped up was the China study. I ordered the China study by T. Holland Campbell and his son. And I came in 2 days, thanks to Amazon. I read it in 2 days. I was freaking out, going, what in the world? That little emoji where the little head goes, that literally is my brain for like 2 days. And I remember sitting on the floor in our bedroom, and my husband would walk by and I'm like, it says right here, you can turn off cancer with plants. He's like, okay. He had no idea what was coming. But at that point, I was like trying to figure this out in my head, because I'm a true believer. I have to walk the model, the behaviors that I want others to follow, be it my children, my community, my patients, because I like to sleep at night. And I have my mother, if anything she instilled in me, was a guilty conscience. So I will try to avoid that guilty conscience as much as possible. And so what happened was I was really just processing, reading as much as I could. There wasn't a ton about that information. There was a few things. There was the nutritionfacts.org website that had, but it wasn't like it is now. There was Dr. McDougall had some articles for doctors who started doing this for patients. But what happened was 2 weeks later, as I was still kind of, diving deeper into the rabbit hole, I had a lupus patient come, and she was younger than me at that time. She had been diagnosed with lupus for about 2 years, was 50 pounds overweight, on 12 different medications, headaches most days of the week, high doses of steroids, on immune suppressing drugs, very strong drugs. And she's telling me here she is in her late 30s, Dr. Morris, I don't think I can keep working, right? So here's a young woman, and I would say, what we consider the height of life, or at that time, at least I thought. And this is, she's like not going to be able to sustain a living, provide for herself. She's got this devastating disease, and she was just feeling hopeless. The whole time she's like being vulnerable with me, and I'm just sitting there smiling, going, I think this is the one. I'm going to try plants. I'm going to give this to my first patient. I'm going to purposely prescribe plants. And she's like, I'm sure looking at me like, is she even listening to me? I was listening, and I was thinking to myself, how am I going to share this with her? And it just blurted out. I was like, I think you should change what's on the end of your fork. And she's like, so I was like, I told her about the patients. I told her about my research and these anti-inflammatory foods and the nutrients and amazing things. And she's like, I'll try anything. She was in such a place of suffering and loss that what was interesting, again, no coincidences, she was open to such a radical shift, right? And so she did what I told her, which was not very much. But we did measure her CRP, which is an inflammatory marker, before she left, and it was 3 times high normal. She came back in 2 weeks. So they said, I can't have you come back in a month because it's just too exciting. I'm very excited about what's going to happen. And she came back, and she was 8 pounds lighter. Headaches were gone. Her CRP dropped 300%. And
Wow.
I was like astounded. Fast forward 5 months, lost 50 pounds off 7 or 12 medications, and eventually had negative antibodies. So at that point of the 2-week follow-up, it was a Friday night. I was like, all right, that's it. I'm done. I hear you. This is it. This works. And I'll just figure out the details as we go along. Right. And I didn't have to have it all figured out, but I knew what I had to do that night. So I went home and I took a garbage bag. I threw everything out that was animal origin: eggs, meat, dairy, cheese, all in the garbage. I told the family, my husband, my kids were then, how old were they? 13, 15, and 18. I was like, we're going on a plant-based diet. And the kids were like, And so mom is going through another one of her things. She'll eventually come back around. My husband, who's very kind, he's just like, are you still cooking? And he's like, I said, yes. He goes, okay. And I'm like, okay. So I was very lucky, but I think there was a reason for the seamless transition. I wouldn't say seamless, but the pretty easily transition, because obviously a lot of things have come out of that decision. But what was really funny is I stayed up late trying to figure out, okay, now what do I cook? And then, then the panic set in. But that was Friday. So Sunday, we went to church, came back, and there was a quarter of a grass-fed beef in my freezer, because I was like, what do I do with this? Because you live in Colorado, you don't just throw it out. And I'm not giving it to a human because I'm determined that that's not healthy. So I'm sitting here, in my head going, I don't know what to do. Do I give it again? What do I do? Animal shelter or what? But lo and behold, we come home, and somewhere over the weekend, that freezer broke, and all that meat had started to defrost. I'm not kidding. There was literally liquid, bodily fluids rolling down the garage. I still can smell it and see it to this day.
That happened at my house too. That's the worst stench I've ever smelled. When that deep freeze breaks and that meat's in there, it makes you gag.
So what happened was my husband's like, well, Laurie, if you hadn't been with me, I would have sworn you unplugged this. And I was like, no, I'm pretty sure that that's God speaking and saying we're done. And I haven't had meat or dairy since, and that's been 12 years. And that's that moment when my husband, we've been married, it'll be 31 years in April. At that time was, oh my gosh, I don't know, 19, 20 years. And he had gained weight over the course of time. He lost 70 pounds in 3 months. And by going plant-based, right? Yeah. And I mean, I had never dealt with the weight issues, right? But what was interesting, I've been diagnosed with hypothyroidism since the birth of my second kiddo. See, he'll be 28 in April. So almost 28 years now. And over the course of that summer, oh, well, my allergies disappeared. So I did have some allergies. But my thyroid improved to the point that my TSH was 0. And I suffered some consequences of having too much medication. I had to
Sure.
decrease my medication. I'm still on levothyroxine, it's the only medicine I'm taking, but that was quite remarkable to see that even at that point, 15 years into a diagnosis of hypothyroidism, that there could see some improvement, and that was really quite remarkable. So yeah, so anyway, but that is literally how I jumped into the rabbit hole and have yet to emerge. And yeah,
You
I love
never
it.
look back.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
only been good.
It's interesting. One of the things that you mentioned about, the stench, right, of the rotting meat, and or even just the defrosting meat. It wasn't even necessarily rotting just yet, but that really got to me again, just as a consumer. I realized that, if something had to be cooked like that or frozen like that, or managed in a certain way, to keep disease off of it, I thought, I don't know that I want to put that in my body. The same for dairy, right? Dairy has to be kept at a certain temperature and all of that. And when I learned more about dairy's link to autoimmune and dairy's link to just all kinds of disease, I thought, okay, this makes it easy. And it's so interesting you say that you read the China study in 2 days. That book is like 800 pages.
Yeah,
So
dude, I can't even tell you. I was consuming it like I was starving. And because it was like, but then again, I think I was just in a place I was ready, because I was
you're ready.
seeing, like, I was becoming frustrated with not being able to work within the system of
Mhm.
medications and interventions, which are absolutely crucial still. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
glad we have these available, and I'm not dissing or dismissing the need for those in appropriate cases, but we never highlight the value of these lifestyle interventions, these simple choices we make every single day, and how they can be life altering for so many people.
Sure.
And yeah, the plant-based diet is just a piece. I feel like sleep and stress, but even more so, more than anything, I think if you can walk out of suffering and into understanding that once you connect with that deeper sense of who you are, you start making different choices because you have a different relationship. You see that you are different. You're not your thoughts, you're not your emotions. You
Mhm.
are an observer of these. And once you connect with that and you build that presence in your life, you make different choices because you're coming from a different place. You're not coming one from scarcity or fear or
Exactly.
anxiety or depression. You're making choices out of empowering courage because you are something like that. You are your essence, your what's
Mhm.
the word? There's no way to describe it. The
Your
being
spirit.
that strength, right? And so yeah, so it's just different. And so that is the fun piece to try to help people see. It's really interesting. I ask patients as they come in to join, there's an intake form, and I asked them, I was like, what are your values? What does your body, spirit, and mind need to heal? And it's really, the answers are really quite, if people are being transparent and truthful and really vulnerable, I get some really remarkable answers. And one visit that stood out dramatically to me was, she said, Dr. Marbas, nobody's ever asked me that. And I never even thought about it. She goes, I didn't even know what my values are. And she
Mhm.
started to cry. And I was like, here's a woman in her midlife, who's lived a life without even understanding that her values, or
Yep.
even having time or permission to reflect upon what is she here for, what is her purpose, what is her joy, right? And so there's so much pain that comes from that evolves into habits of eating, habits of abuse, addiction, whether it be shopping, sex, alcohol, gambling, because our egos get into the way of that so much, because we're trying to live a story or hide or feed
Right.
emotions and put them aside, getting rid of things. And so yeah, that is the powerful message that I think people need to hear.
It's
100%.
I think you are so in line with what we do at Real Food Recovery too, because we take that full all-encompassing approach too. We understand it's not just about the food. It cannot be about the food. So it's
Mhm.
like you said, the stress management, the sleep, the spirituality, the movement, all those different things. When we work with our clients, we look at everything. We were in a Zoom meeting today working with someone, and she's fairly new, and she was bringing up these things that we were working on with her. And she goes, you guys kind of create a sneak attack, don't you?
Ah,
I laughed so hard. She said, before you knew it, I was in here. Now I'm journaling, and now I'm thinking deeply about my thoughts and how
Um,
what's happening in my mind connects to the food addiction. So I have not stopped laughing about that. We take
that's
a sneak
awesome.
attack.
that's hilarious.
I
I
That's
love
know.
it.
hilarious.
Go
So
Well,
sneakiness, go. That's powerful.
yeah. And you said something about values too, Lori. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that's so Paige and I have one of our, we have these branches of recovery, right? Which is really all they are just 16 sources of dopamine,
yes.
Mm,
16 alternatives to the food. And one
mhm,
of them is personal values, alignment with personal values. And
mm,
I remember it was 2016. I had no idea I was coming out of a marriage at the time. I had lost a bunch of weight, but I had no idea who I was. No
mm,
idea who I was. And I was white knuckling, dry drunk around food, trying to moderate processed foods at the time. And I might have looked different, but I certainly was progressing with my illness internally and in my head. And I was living in an apartment in Houston that became this sort of think tank where I started to map out my personal values on this big whiteboard. And I was like, I don't even know who I am, what I stand for, what matters to me. I have no idea. And I was 40 years old. And I started to do the process of literally writing everything out. And I had this big list that I whittled down to 5. And I live by those 5.
mm,
And when I don't live by those 5, I feel it. I feel
mm,
it affects every aspect of everything that I do.
mm,
Uh, and so what we've done is we've taken this personal value, this whole experience, we've brought it to our members. We do workshops around it. We have done a podcast on it. We talk about it with our members on the regular because it's something that is so important for people to understand. When Paige and I even created Real Food Recovery, we sat down
mm,
with our mission and vision. We created them together, talked about the values of the organization we wanted to build, and we try our very best to lead by those values.
mm.
And if
Yeah.
we don't, we hold each other accountable and say, "Hey, are you living by these values? And if not, what's going on?"
That's beautiful. That's absolutely
It
beautiful.
has to be that way, right? Right. In order to have a big, beautiful life, it has to be bigger than, well, what we do is we have an online food addiction recovery community. And so we understand that your life gets bigger. Like Jamie said, we've got these 16 branches when you can practice those, and it takes you out of the food and back into life. So I'm
Yes.
sure that you work with people that are on somewhere on the food addiction spectrum.
Yeah.
What do you do? How do you handle your patients? What's your recommendation
And
there?
what's your stance on
Yeah,
even on food addiction? That I think would be a
Oh,
good
there's
place to
definitely
start.
a food addiction, right? Just because
thank you.
there's no DSMR.
Yeah.
Mm.
Uh, I think there's entities in our world that would make it difficult to state this is food addiction because then there will be some type of economic backlash to
Right.
entities that are beyond our, our ability to deal with. But that working with what we got. One, I've come from it from 2 ways. I tell people, you have a habit of eating food in these circumstances. So I try to describe it where I'm not giving them another label or diagnosis because I feel like sometimes people um, want to attach a label to themselves so they can have an excuse not to change because like I just have food addiction. I just made poor choice because I have a disease. I have food addiction and or I have whatever, right? I have type 2 diabetes. So, my blood sugar is going to be out of control. So I just take more medications. And so I try to really first understand and teach them, or not even teach, just help them be aware of what is occurring and understanding what habits are, how our brain works, how we're developing these neural tracks and why, right? And once they understand that, they're like, huh. And they can be an orchestra. They can really be the conductor of their life symphony, right? So they can really choose to remove someone that's out of a line or out of tune with another player, right? But the whole goal is to understand that that reward center needs to be dismantled and dampened, right? We can change prompts, we can change triggers, we can change behaviors and substitute, but it never gets really rid of the root cause, which is the emotional dysregulation, the pain, the struggle, where it all came from. So that, you know, once they start understanding that, they can start working in their own mind. Maybe they need to get counseling. Sometimes that works for people. Other times they can do it with just being aware. And so that's how I try to approach it, where it's and give them a tool of mindfulness and tool of
Yeah.
presence and awareness, because so many of us live in this rush world and it's just harder and harder and harder. I feel like we're getting tighter, tighter, tighter constricted. But there seems to be a growing presence and understanding, and people coming out of their shell, so to speak. It's like, well, we can't keep doing this. We have to change something. And that is the first step into seeing hopefully society-wide changes, but it starts with the individual. But that's kind of how I like to work at it, is like, okay, let's look at the tools. Let's make this a very, sometimes it's a emotional discussion. Sometimes it's a very lecture type. It depends on the person, right? Because everyone will respond a little differently, but everyone needs to understand that your brain is just trying to do the best it could, right? And you know, it's like we'd mentioned about Judd Brewer's work, and it's got a very practical approach to it and makes it very approachable for everyday person. So it's a fantastic book by him, is The Hunger Habits. It's just his newest book. And he's also plant-based, by the way. So, but yeah, so that's some amazing things, tools. But yeah, so it absolutely exists. And if someone comes to me is like, I'm a food addict, I'm like, okay, so you have food addiction. You aren't necessarily, and you guys may disagree, but I'm a big fan of removing labels.
Yeah.
Because if we have a label, it's very easy to remain attached to that label, and it will dictate your thoughts and your behaviors for
Very
sure.
Yeah,
true.
we definitely say you are not your addiction. You
Right.
have an addiction. You are not your addiction.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's see what we can do with that.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things that one of our leaders, there's 4 leaders, including Paige and I, of the community. And one of our leaders has built this, we call it a sort of a mini program. One of the ways that Paige and I look at it as, it's called Real Food Mastery. And it's really just bringing folks into this whole idea of needing and connecting with the areas of their life that they want to shore up. Food is what brings them in. Most of the folks that come into Real Food Mastery, again, it meets once a week. It's much less intensive than a recovery program like the one we built, but it kind of introduces these ideas without calling it addiction.
Right.
And she, you know, Heather Hewitt leads it. She's so skilled. And just talking about these are the behaviors, and yes, once you get the food in a place where you can figure out that it's whole, unprocessed, single ingredient foods, plant driven, then we've got a lot of those members coming now and saying, I need more than just the food. It's bigger to me. And Heather's, you know, her whole concept was that so many people are resistant to this whole label or idea even of food addiction. They don't want to think of themselves as addicted. They don't want to think about food as addictive or the way they respond to it. And then we're able to sort of explain to them in this Real Food Mastery program, which is sort of a farm team for what we're building at Real Food Recovery. Where we'll explain to them that you are acting exactly the way that you were designed to act, given the hyperpalatable foods that are available everywhere and marketed everywhere and are cues and triggers everywhere around us. You're acting exactly the way that your brain was wired to act, and the food companies know it and the marketers know it. So we can remove that shame. I would say that it really does work, but it is so interesting because we don't want to label anyone. And we find that there's a subset of folks that are in that addictive cycle that really do not want to, understandably do not want to admit it.
And
Right. Well, then it means that you have to admit you have something you're out of control with, right? Which is
Hard for some.
you're well, and you're basically attacking something that they've identified with, like you're
Point.
telling them something that you're like, it's hard for someone to settle for a diagnosis even, or like you have this problem, they get very defensive because they don't, it's like, wait, this isn't working. Or they're saying, it's kind of like this, reminds me of this real quick. I'd gone out to eat with some people I didn't know very well years ago, did my plant-based thing, it's, of course, it's colorful and yummy. Someone's like, oh, so why are you eating this? And I was like, well, I eat a plant-based diet, and just was going to leave it at that. She looks at her plate and looks at me. And so you're saying what I'm eating isn't healthy?
Ah,
I can do
Okay.
this two things here. I can give you my answer, but you asked, but I could tell by the tone and the reference that is like, so let's get in this discussion because I'm going to tell you what I'm doing is still right. How dare you tell me that I'm wrong? That's how they take it, even though you're giving them in a loving, they're going to construct it and see it the way they want. And
Totally.
so I
Totally.
totally get it. I have patients do the same thing. They say, I'm going to embrace this plant-based diet, but they will tell me, but they're still 200 pounds overweight. You're not eating oatmeal in your salads. Like everything they tell me is like, it's just not going, it's not happening. Right. So they're telling me a story, but I know what's going, like, as we start talking and they start
Yeah.
telling me more, they're like, well, yeah, I am going out and I'm still doing this. I'm like, okay. And there's no judgment here. You get choose whatever you want. I just want you to make mindful choices. So when you see you're in this cycle of this habit, let's give yourself a time and space, let the craving, and you can observe it. Then you can make a choice. You indulge in it or you don't. But at least you've made a mindful choice. You're in this present moment, making a choice based on whether you think this aligns with your values or not. And then it's okay. There's no shame, no judgment. You do
Right.
you, but at least now you know.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
that,
You're not a
that's
victim.
all we can do.
That's exactly where I was when I kind of figured out the science behind it and it lined up to how I reacted. I had relief. I was
Yeah.
grateful because then now I had something to work with. I understood it and I knew what to do from there. But before I was just like, these cravings just come over me and come over me and come over me. I have no idea what's going on. Why is this happening? Why can't I control myself, with when these big binges come on a couple times a month? And nobody else was talking about it. So I thought, I mean, I'm not going to talk about it with my girlfriends. Nobody else is talking about it. But once I figured out the science, it was such a huge relief to understand this wasn't my fault. And like Jamie said, I was responding exactly the way that specific food was meant for me to respond.
Right. You're just doing what your body was doing, what it should do. It's like, calories down. Remember, eat.
Yeah,
It's good.
exactly.
But there's the willpower piece is such a myth when it comes to this,
Oh,
right? So
Yeah.
it's
Absolutely.
quite
we
funny.
could do a whole nother podcast on the myth of willpower.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. What do you think? You've talked so much about the journey into this lifestyle, and that's why I love, I know that there's others in the world who will talk about plant exclusive, but I love the whole theme of plant-based because one of the ways that we get folks closer to health is to get them to crowd out, right? The crowding out strategy, where they're crowding out what they're eating now with nutrient dense foods. And one of the things that I talked about the other night with our members was, nature abhors a vacuum. So if we're constantly talking about the foods we can't eat or the foods we don't, we shouldn't eat, or whatever the vernacular is, isn't that setting us up to just be like, okay, well, what do I do? So I said, what if we flip the script and think about it from here's what I'm going to be focused on. I'm not necessarily avoiding addictive foods anymore. What if I'm or removing addictive foods? What if I'm adding in nutrient dense foods, nutrient dense plant-based foods specifically? And I'm not talking about macronutrients, I'm talking about micronutrients. What foods can I choose that are going to have the most micronutrients, the most fiber, the most water, and the most color for my life? Cheetos don't count, right? So what does that look like? And instead of thinking about what they can't have, think about what they can, and leading with that and crowding out the other stuff. And I will tell you, I've gone a little bit towards a raw journey in this phase of my recovery, and it has been a game changer. Game changer. And I'm very careful with our community because everyone's very impressionable, and that's been something that I've found a lot of joy in for me, but it doesn't necessarily mean everyone, needs to jump on the bandwagon. So I share in a limited way about it. But I know that you went on a raw journey for the first part of this year for a couple of weeks, right? Or 10
A
days?
month, because my youngest challenged me to it. So all my kids are plant-based. My youngest, more of the ethical vegan at this point. He makes healthier choices still, but I mean, his conditioning is that this is animals. I mean, the suffering involved is tremendous, and there's no need for it. The middle one is like, it's just healthier thing to do. And my daughter is really in touch with the climate change piece of it. So there's so many wins to going on a plant-based diet. But yeah, the crowding out is a fantastic way to approach that. But being raw, I loved it. But I still wanted beans. I don't do a lot of greens just because
Yeah.
I just never really did a lot of greens. I definitely do more starchy veggies like potatoes, sweet potatoes, things like that. But
Yeah.
beans and vegetables are my thing. Yeah, I love beans. Grew up on beans. Again, if you come from a home without much money, beans and potatoes are where it's at. We eat beans almost every day. So fruits is I would say fruits probably. I'm trying to think. I'm looking at my fruit over here. My breakfast is always typically raw. Lunch is usually 90% raw just because it's a salad many times. But I start throwing in my beans and stuff. And then dinner is usually a warmer meal. Soup, stew, some type. Like last night I made burritos, right? Like 2 different beans, there's veggies, there's whole grain tortillas, salsa, guac, that type of stuff. So yeah.
So that approach it's not staunch, but it's I find that and again, if there are most days that I'm about 80%, and I'll have some cooked foods at night. And I can't believe the benefits I've seen I was having some joint issues from grains. I was noticing some things, grains that I'd been able to eat for years and eating this way. And all of a sudden this last few months, it's like, So I'm noticing that different phases and stages of life, and now I head into this perimenopause phase of my life. I'm noticing that foods that worked for me before don't work for me as much.
Yeah, being in my mid-50s has you're definitely in a different phase of life. Like 10 years ago is a very different body than I may look the same in that sense, but it's internally there are some changes that occur with menopause. That is a whole nother discussion on menopause and our approach to it and the research and how it was misinterpreted, and where hormone replacement therapy can be a very important piece to this journey, and we should be very open to that discussion. So absolutely. So I think that's that's another piece to it.
We'll have to have you back.
I would love to talk about that. That would be, I mean, our audience demographic would be very
people.
Yeah.
I totally get you.
So any projects you want to talk about, Dr. Marbas, anything other than what we've touched on?
Let's see. I'm about to release a 3-month course called The Psychology of Weight Loss. It builds upon the mindfulness muscle, Fred Jibber, BJ Fogg, that type of thing, just really get into the science of it. And then part of that is also creating the habits based on a whole food plant-based diet or plant slant diet, restorative sleep, stress management, mindful movement with exercise. I think there's a piece of it needs to be more than exercise. It needs to really be a place of mindful movement. and then social relationships, because I think that that's really important. So journaling is a big piece of this, but then I do monthly and live coaching, so it'll be just an
Oh,
ongoing
beautiful.
thing. And then I have my glucose mastermind, which is a 3-month deep dive small group where I give everybody there a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, and we meet regularly for 3 hours a month, hour and a half twice a month, and we walk through what their body's doing in glucose, and it's just a data point for discussion. And so
Yeah.
really interesting things help people understand. They get really tied up and anxious about things, but that's what a wonderful place to talk about stress, and how to do that, and what looking at data and stop in the judgment. And so it's been a really interesting evolution. And so that starts, my next group starts in March.
I
So
love it. I love it. I love it.
I
And
want
of
to
course,
ask
the
you,
Clean Kitchen.
yeah, and the Healing Kitchen, of course, is ongoing.
I do want to ask you one last question. What's your
Yeah.
greatest piece of advice for people that come to you and want to start on a health journey, whether it be food addiction or the plant-based lifestyle or just health in general? Do you have a piece of advice that helps them
Yeah.
get started?
I think, that's evolved as well as I've talked to people and really just honed in. I think one is take a moment, provide space in your life for reflection of two things. One is, what are your greatest senses of value? And two, I ask them to accept that the only constant in life is change. And once they
Mhm.
start reflecting upon that, life gets a lot less stressful. And that allows me to start introducing these big concepts of changing your diet and exercising and working on stress. So, because now we have an anchor and a foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And until that's in place, I find that people really still struggle because we're throwing, the fire's still going. We haven't put out the fire, and now we can start putting in, better plants. And so I
Yeah.
think aligning your life with values, and understanding that change is going to be constant, and that'll helps build resilience and acceptance. And the skill set of flexibility, psychological flexibility, is so essential to being successful in anything in life, and especially the undertaking of health and all the challenges that are in our environment. Until that can be in place, I think you're going to continue to struggle. Yeah.
Brilliant.
So true.
Brilliant way to end.
Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Paige, for your time and the questions you asked. And thank you, Dr. Marbas, for joining us. There are many topics that we could circle back with you on. And just thank you for being a friend of RFR, certainly
Yes.
a friend to me, and for being such a champion
Yes.
for
Yes.
my journey. I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And we'll have to have you on my podcast, both of you. I think it'd be a blast.
Oh,
So
we would love that so
yeah,
much.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And if you want to know more about us, you can find us at realfoodrecovery4u.com. That's the number 4, the letter U, and that tells all about our online food addiction recovery community, and we would love to see you there. Thanks, guys. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Take care.